Hello, hello.
Hello. There we go. It works.
It kind of does.
I've had a few issues with the Facebook like calling the past few days. So.
How you doing, man? Hello, my name is Steve Joel, and this series of podcasts is a chance to hear from the people who've changed the way we do Warhammer, whether it's painting or playing or collecting, reading or consuming content. I want you to meet the game changers. So your day job is you're a butcher? I am now. I used to be a teacher.
And
Definitely. Did you have to retrain? Sorry, we can do all this later, but I'm interested in.
No. I mean, I didn't retrain. So, I mean, essentially, being a butcher, I'm not butchering carcasses. I'm preparing meat, whatever spices, whatever you need to do. Maybe you have to obviously cut the meat in certain ways.
Right.
So it's just sort of meat production. But butcher sounds better.
Butcher sounds better, and I feel like it's a great 40k name too, like Neil the Butcher Kerr.
Yeah.
In this episode, we meet Neil Kerr, and we're going to hear a lot of stories that feature beer, for a start. We also find out how 40k saved Neil's life, and how he and some friends changed the way tournaments are enjoyed in the UK, just by shouting, "Flame on." It's a fun conversation.
By the way, you can't hear me breathing. I sometimes breathe too heavily when I'm on the on-calls.
Okay, well, I'll let you know. I haven't noticed it being a thing, but
no worries.
I
get complained at on my podcast. People are like, "Neil, are you breathing?" It's like, oh.
Well, the thing is, that only counts like in the background, right? When other people are, and there won't be much. It's just you and me, man. So you're going to do most of the talking. So
cool.
Here we go. This episode is supported by the Frontline Gaming Network. They are having a huge sale in their eBay store. You should especially look up the pre-owned models. Some fully painted, some assembled, some still in the box, shrink-wrapped and waiting for you. Check out the Frontline Gaming Store on eBay. The link to that store is in our show notes, along with the links to all of the other elements that you're going to find interesting in this podcast. Now, let's get to Sweden. My guest today has been a part of the Scottish team. He's been part of the ETC as a player and as a chief judge. On Twitter, which he gave up bothering with in 2012, he described himself as part geek, part rugby. He's gone by several names. One of those was Scuzzlebum, and he's best known still as the chief judge at the WTC. Neil Kerr, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Steve. I didn't even remember I had a Twitter account back in 2012. So that's your investigative journalism is highly impressive, to say the least.
Well, I want to ask about Scuzzlebum. What was that all about?
Oh God, that was back when I was like a young teenager. Basically, I was like 13. I was the first person in my year to start growing facial hair, and I'd tend to have these big bushy sideburns. We're talking 1995, Liam Gallagher, Oasis, man. Right. So I had big bushy sideburns, and it was like, you look like such a scuzz, you look like such a bum, and I put the two together. Right. And that was like my, trendy, cool Hotmail email address. Right. Yeah, I kept holding it for far too many years than I should have, really.
Scuzzlebum had a Twitter account for about 5 minutes, and then, but also you had a blog going for a bit, Scuzzlebum on Blogger or Blogspot or something, which was a 40k thing.
I actually had a couple of blogs. I actually did 2 blogs. Was it Scuzzlebum Scuttlebutt, which was the first blog, and that ran for a while. But then I went to sort of study at uni, study history and teaching, so I sort of ran out of time. So as with blogs, if they fall off the side, if you can't sort of keep up with them regularly. Yeah. And then I sort of like thought about it, and I sort of like, I'll resurrect it. And I did another blog called Tyrannid Pink, or Pink Tyrannids, because that was an army I was very famous for. Right. Alex Fennell, my buddy Alex, isn't the only person who was known back then for having pink armies. Right. And that ran for a while, but then I moved to Sweden, and being in Sweden, definitely preoccupied my time too much.
Okay, well, we'll definitely get to Sweden because as much as my investigative journalism turned up a few gems, I still couldn't find the why. So we'll ask that soon. But before we get into all of that and before we get to 40K, being a New Zealander, I noticed the word rugby come up a couple of times. Tell me about your rugby playing days.
Oh, gosh. So basically, I was the biggest kid in my year in terms of like heights and whatnot when I was like 11 years old. So I went to high school, and it was like basically the sports teacher looked at me and said, "You play rugby?" "No, sir." "You're going to play rugby now."
Do now, yeah.
And I was in this quite competitive school I played rugby for, so I was in the school first. We actually one year went all the way to what was back then called the Daily Mail Cup, which was the highest level of schools rugby in the UK. We went to the finals, which is pretty awesome. And so I just sort of played. So as a kid, I played a lot of rugby.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Sweden when I was 16, the first time round, my father is a military engineer. He does avionics engineers for British Aerospace, so designs jet fighters basically. So I came over here, played some more rugby here, which was interesting. So the standard was much lower.
Yeah,
it was much more fun.
Yeah.
And then, just sort of thing I sort of kept up on and off when I was in my 20s. I played a little bit of rugby in Manchester. When I went to uni at York, I played rugby there as well. And it's just been something I've always kept in my life. Eventually I sort of had a back injury which forced me to stop. Propping for 15 years, takes its toll.
Yeah.
So I transitioned to coaching and refereeing. So I spent 7 years coaching the local youth team. We even took the team to the Swedish youth championships and won gold.
Wow.
The last year, which was very, very cool.
Yeah.
And then sort of like also refereeing because. So again, Swedish rugby is not the highest standard in the universe. So but it's full of lots of expats, and we all get very angry when the referees make the wrong calls. And I was one of the people who got very, very angry. So someone just said to me, "Well, bloody referee yourself then if you can do better." So I did.
I feel like there's some 40K crossover happening here now too. So
very much.
I want to explain to our American audience, because the Australians and the UK folk and maybe some Europeans will understand what we're talking about, but possibly a lot of Europeans and Americans won't. Rugby is a bit like American football, but with no pads. And if Neil was a prop, that means he had to smash into other giant guys in a thing called a scrum and hold a platform there. And there's so much on your neck and your back when you're doing that. And obviously, as a New Zealander coming from the greatest rugby nation in the world, rubbing it in.
I will not question that.
But this is not what that's about. Let's get into 40K. One of the things that turned up for me was a White Dwarf interview back in 2007 about something called Flame On. Was that your first brush with 40K fame? Being published in White Dwarf is not something very many people achieve in their lifetimes.
No, I'd had my photo in White Dwarf a few times. It was kind of random. Here's a shot of a tournament, or here's a shot of Warhammer World. But that was the first sort of brush, and it's an interesting story. I mean, so I've played 40K since first edition. So I'm old enough to have done that, right. And I got into competitive 40K in second edition just before the first Chaos Space Marine Codex ever dropped. And so I played 40K till sort of like 15, 16, then dropped off as most people do. Teenage years, rugby got more interesting, beers and girls as well. And then I came back into it in my 20s when I sort of left home, had a job, and was looking for a hobby. And I think that was around the time sort of third, fourth ed. And it was like, I want to go to tournaments. And it was like, me and a few guys in the local area in Manchester, like, this would be good fun. It'd be good fun to go as a team, have a little club, like call ourselves something, it'd be fun. And we've been to a couple of local events, and there was a big team at the time called the Northern Wasters, who were very, very serious. And actually, people back in the day will agree with me, not very nice guys to play against. They were incredibly cliquey, not very nice. It was just not pleasant people to play with in general. Right. So we were like, right, we have to be the opposite. We want to go and have fun, and we're going to be the opposite of these guys. So we went there, bright red shirts, and we're just very obnoxiously loud. Like we'd all shout Flame On top of our voices and the first dice roll for the game together. Any like really big dice roll, we'd all shout. It was maybe we're grown men playing with man dollies. Let's not take it too seriously. Right. And we did this as like an active way to kind of break down the overly seriousness of like tournaments at the time. And we do this. We'd also offer our opponents drinks, like, good game, mate, win or lose, you want to go for the bar for a pint afterwards, have a drink and stuff. And And all this just sort of suddenly spiraled out of control from a couple of lads in Manchester. So we had like, everybody, most of the gamers in Manchester sort of fell into our club. And then suddenly more and more people from outside the area started gravitating to us. We had like, guys in Birmingham wearing Flame On shirts, guys like all over the UK started like getting part. It's just this, it's like an idea, just like be part of this kind of group, this movement. And one of the people who really liked it was Owen Rees, the old White Dwarf editor.
Right.
Because one of his best mates, Jonathan, got quite hooked up with us, and then he got Owen involved. And Owen was like, "Oh, this would be amazing. We have to have, you guys are you guys are great. You guys are exactly what tournaments and the hobby is about. It's a massive amount of positivity. You've got guys who win the GTs, you've got guys who come last, and none of you care, and all you just hang out. It's great fun." So he did the article, basically.
Yeah.
And if you've seen, as you've probably seen the photo of the article, it's a bit controversial because you've got guys. It's a photo in White Dwarf of like 20 people holding pints of beer and bottles of beer in their hands, which is definitely not going to happen in today's White Dwarf.
Right.
And in fact, even one of the guys in the photo is underage.
Okay, well, that definitely wouldn't happen. Yeah.
Which is like very interesting. But it was just, we just had a lot of fun, and people just enjoyed, at first people thought we were a bit over the top, and they kind of realized what we were doing and why, and just everyone sort of gravitated to it. And it sort of kickstarted a really interesting time in sort of tournament play, competitive play in the UK, because you suddenly had like other teams springing up, like the Dudley Boys, like the Spiky Club, who kind of like wanted to vie to be the better team than us, and we ended up like a little team, like playoffs and stuff between the teams and team challenges the night before a big tournament and stuff. It was great fun.
And do you know what, that kind of flowed over. I found another article from several years later, I want to say 2010, 2011, written by a guy who had been out of the tournament scene and then came back and was really surprised to see the attitude of the players at the tournament, in that it was friendly and it was fun. And he credited you specifically, top players in general, but you specifically with engendering that kind of attitude at tournaments, which must have been a big deal then.
Yeah, I mean, when we got into tournaments, it was very cliquey. It was everyone kind of played the games and drifted off, and no one was really, it didn't feel as much fun as it could be. And myself and another guy who sort of started this out, Richard Hogan, was a big rugby guy, we just like said, we're going to kind of treat this like a bit of a rugby team, in terms of like, rugby team on a social.
Yeah.
And just get people involved and have fun. And we were stood in Buckland's Bar having like drinking games with like random people and stuff. And it just became this huge thing. And it sounds very braggy, but it did sort of change the tone of the UK scene. And it became this kind of very inclusive thing where everyone's going to have a drink together. Everyone's hang out together afterwards. People wouldn't drift off to the hotels. People would stay in the bar, or like a bar near the venue or something. You have 30 people going to a pub for food afterwards. And it became really, really good. It became this like great sort of thing to be part of. And it attracts more and more people, because obviously people who play this game are basically, you're looking for social interaction. So you see like, half the tournament, they're all like laughing and joking together and having drinks. And you play one of those guys and he says to you afterwards, "Hey, do you want a pint?" You're going to say yes. And so that you become part of this. And it was great.
I get a feeling from you that there's just you're a kind of guy, and it's happened in rugby in Sweden, you're the kind of guy that always ends up being the organiser. You always end up kind of falling into that role of organising teams and organising events. And it happened in 40K almost kind of since before you could walk. You've had a passion for organising 40K events.
Yeah, it's just, if you want something doing, do it yourself. That kind of attitude,
Yeah.
I wanted to run tour. We were like, to talk about tournaments. Oh, we should have more tournaments. Well, I'll organise one. Why don't we have a tournament where you play just 1,000-point games? I'll organise one of those. Just these ideas. Instead of saying, "Oh, I wish somebody would do this," I was like, "Well, I'll do it."
Yeah.
And that's just kind of always been my attitude, really.
So you organised the UK GT in 2010. And then you went off to Sweden. But I want to talk about the UK GT, or just organising events of that scale all the way back then. Tell me about that. What was that like?
So for quite a few years, the first ones I sort of really organised was a thing called Botch, Battle of the Chumps, which is a great name for a tournament. And that was a flame on event. It was a flame on. And we started off with sort of like 16 guys one day down in Sheffield at the old Bower Bunker. And it was a case of, this is good fun. And each year it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we eventually ended up in Warhammer World. We took filling the entirety of Warhammer World, this tournament, which wasn't just 40k. It was 40k, Fantasy, Blood Bowl was being played, the Epic. It was like all games. It was like a mini convention,
Right.
which didn't really exist in the UK at that time. There was only one other multi-system tournament, and that was run by the First Company veterans, the actual Warhammer World Gaming Club. They ran their own multi-system thing as well, and that was lots of fun. And this was back when GW had their Throne of Skulls GTs, so quite serious. They were seen as the serious tournaments in the UK. There was heats to qualify for the final. It was people from all over the world would come. I think the players who won the tournaments in America got their part of their prize was flights to the UK. You had like the top players in Italy and Spain and France. They'd all come to the final as well. So that was very hardcore. And then GW sort of, in their business, they'd obviously, for whatever reason, they decided, we don't want to do this. We don't want to go with competitive gaming at this level anymore. So they completely canned all those tournaments. And they also said there will be no non-GW tournaments in Warhammer World anymore. Right. So suddenly the community had gone from having this like great series of tournaments, this like high-level tournaments, to poof, they're gone. And the usual thing is, what we're going to do now? And me was like, we'll just organise our own thing then. Yeah. So we did the idea was it was the UK Independent GT, and I just got in touch with all the guys. I knew all the clubs, all the different gaming groups around the country who ran tournaments. We all knew each other by this point. It's like, who wants to get involved with me? And I had people from all the country say, I can do this. I can help you with that. I want to do this. And we ran the first event in Maelstrom Games, and I think we had the capacity of Maelstrom Games was like 100 people. And we had like over 120 people show up, because even the owner of Maelstrom Games was like, sell more tickets. When he was like, actually, building tables for us, and they're like talking about they could put a tent in the car park and stuff to get more players. And it was just phenomenal. It's just like, this is a real indication of how big competitive gaming became in the UK. That this event on its first time out, I think it sold out within half an hour.
Wow!
And just like bam, done, and it was absolutely amazing. And that sort of really kicked off the idea that, hey, we don't just have to rely on GW to the big events.
Tell me about being part of Team Scotland. Did that come before all of that?
So it came before the UK GT. So the ETC, the first time the 40k was at the ETC was in 2007. And back then there was a Team England, which was basically a bunch of my friends from Manchester the guy called Dave Minnes had read about this ETC idea on the Warhammer forum, and he said, this sounds like great fun. So he basically put a post up saying, who wants to come? And the majority of people were like locals in Manchester, a couple of other guys like Gus O'Connor, an absolute legend of the game who in Leeds, he came along, and it was a case of, who wants to go to Poland and play 40k and drink beers for a weekend? And that's what they did. At the time I was between jobs, so I couldn't go with them, but you had people like Gaz Jones, who's has been to every ETC. He's the current Team Wales captain. You had a guy called Chris Webb, who's from Ninja Bread fame. He paints for GW, he paints for Mantic and stuff. There's quite a few guys, but we'll say not many serious tournament players. So they went there, they had fun, they spent the whole weekend drinking, and they came 11th out of 10 teams. Because the Slovenians did so badly on the Saturday they left, and still the English came below them after playing an extra day. But they didn't care. It was fun, and that started it. And so the next year, there was a team pulled together and such like. And in 2009, that was we tried to get a Scottish team, couldn't get enough people, and I was asked, I want to play for Team England. So I was like, I'll come along. So I went to Germany, played the ETC, went an England top, got a lot of shit from my family for that. But it was good fun, and I was like, this is amazing. This tournament is absolutely amazing. There's going to Europe and playing against all these European teams, and swapping drinks and everything after the games, having a laugh. Everyone was in an ice hockey hall. Everyone was sleeping in the ice hockey hall together. So the next year, managed to put together a guy called Tim King, who another sort of old legend of the UK community. We managed to get enough guys together who were Scottish heritage or who to claim Scottish heritage, like their grandparents, to bring a Team Scotland over. So that was in 2010. That was the first time Team Scotland came.
Wow.
It was great fun. We didn't do very well. We won, but we did get most sporting team, and I did win the best painted army. So we did quite well on the trophy front, if you count those. And I just had a blast.
Yeah, and that seems to have been certainly what it was about in the early years.
And probably it still is, although there definitely now seems to be more of a serious competitive element to it, and definite bragging rights, for teams that do well.
I mean, even back then it was serious, but it was, very much a generational thing. Most people were saying my age, so it was basically the ETC was populated by 20 to 25-year-olds. That was the majority of the players, young lads, a lot of them students, congregating in Europe to drink beers and play 40k. So it was, people still took it seriously, but it has become much more serious as an event, as the event's grown over the years. Now you have, teams aren't staying up till 4 a.m. every single night partying together and stuff. They only do that on the Sunday night after the tournament's ended.
And is that partly because those guys who were 25 then are now 35 or whatever, maybe even older, and so the tournament, they've grown with the tournament, and so now they're a bit more mature and they've got kids and they've gone back and they're taking it more seriously?
A little bit, yeah. And there's still lots of new players coming in all the time, but it has just become more serious. At the end of the day, you invest in, for the guys who are very competitive, it's not just the cost of going to the WTC or the ETC. That's a week in somewhere in Europe. That's hotels for a week, flights, all these things. It's not just that cost. It's the army, which might be a very unique and specific army for that event. And then it's the amount of time you invest into it. A lot of the top teams, like Team England, Poland, America, a lot of these teams, those players will lock in their lists very early, their armies, and they'll spend all year practicing. They'll be going to as many tournaments as possible. They'll be having practice weekends multiple times throughout the year where they're just repping. Before the event, like a month before the event happens, all the teams send their lists in, and then those top teams, they'll be looking at every single list that every team is playing, and they'll be going, right, how do we beat that one? Let's rep it. Let's rep, play, and that's that huge time investment, that they put into it, means that they want results. They are going to take it more seriously as a result.
And it's become so much more international, which we can get to later on. Maybe we'll come back to the WTC as it is now, because that's a whole nother conversation. In the meantime, let's go back to Neil Kerr, and the progress of your life, because at around about then you've organised the UK GT 2010. 2011, you hand over the reins to someone else because you've got to go to Sweden. So why Sweden?
So as I alluded to earlier, I actually came to Sweden when I was 16, the first time. I went to college, or in Swedish, gymnasiet. So 16 to 19, I was in Sweden because my dad works for British Aerospace. He's a jet fighter engineer.
Right.
And so I'd lived in Sweden for 3 years, made a lot of friends, had a lot of fun. And I come back to the UK and moved away from home, moved to Manchester. And then basically a friend of mine from Sweden, she moved over. We ended up getting together, and we've been together for years and years. And and then we sort of decided after a while being in the UK, and we just thought, we're not entirely happy living here. The amount we work, how little we get paid, the quality of living is lower than a lot of other places, including Sweden. So we made the decision to sort of move back.
Yeah.
So she moved a year before me because she was going to do a master's, and this is a very special master's. Only happened every year. And I was, like, I'm going to finish my degree, and I'll move the year after. So in 2012, I finished my degree. Sort of spent the summer at home with my parents, sort of, dealing with all my stuff, selling everything that I needed to sell. Because end of the day, it costs so much to ship stuff. It was a bit easier just to sell things.
I actually found a post online where you're selling orc armies and everything else, just getting rid of stuff to get out.
I sold all my armies except the army I was going to run at the ETC that year. I sold, all my furniture, everything. It was actually quite therapeutic, just literally. Yeah. I went from having a 3-bedroom semi-detached house to having 3 suitcases and a couple of moving boxes. I just going through, do I need all these books? I've got hundreds and hundreds of books. No, I'll give them away to my old high school.
Yeah.
Just went through everything, just sold everything. You accumulate so much junk in your life. So I got rid of it all, and then came to Sweden. And then 2 weeks later, the girl I'd been with for nearly 10 years broke up with me.
Oh. But you
weren't expecting that.
No, but you've stayed in Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, I'd made a decision to move there not just to be with her, but because I wanted to be here.
Right.
So
because it's a nice place.
It is, and it's a nice place to be, nice place to live. I have friends here through even back when I was living there, and I had a lot of friends from the ETC. One of the reasons I ended up being in Gothenburg was because the majority of the Swedish ETC team were based in Gothenburg.
Yeah.
So I ended up, couch surfing for a few months. A lot of the guys, either the rugby guys or the gamer guys, sort of took me under the wings. I was couch surfing until I found my own place, and and then you can say, what is now 8.5 years later, I am married. I've got a fantastic wife. I've had my birth of our first son 7 months ago. So life is great.
It's
funny how things change.
Yeah.
Funny how things change. 8 years ago, when I just moved over and this all happened, I was like, oh Christ, what do I do? Do I move back? Do I stay? And silver lining. It's when I look back where I was at that point, where I am now. Yeah, much happier.
I feel like that, in a nutshell, is the way mental health needs to be dealt with, and that if you can just, people go through tough times, and if you can just get the message across to them, look, in a couple of years you'll look back on this and you'll be in a much better spot. But again, that's not what this conversation is supposed to be about.
Yeah, but unfortunately could be, because mental health has been something I've struggled with the vast majority of my life for different reasons. So yeah,
I don't think you're alone in that. In this hobby, I mean, in the wider world as well, but I think probably in this hobby, Winters and I had a chat in a previous episode along similar lines. In this hobby, I think it's a big deal.
It is, and I can say without a doubt that 40k rugby and 40k have saved my life on multiple occasions.
Yeah,
having that network of people that when it all starts falling down, that they step in and help you and look after you. No matter where you end up in the world, there are people there who care for you, and even people you don't know will just they'll put their neck out for you because, hey, you're a rugby player, or, hey, you're a 40k player. I know we don't know each other, but I know who you are, and I want to help you because we have common values. We share values, because as gamers we generally all have the same values.
Yeah. I found a one of your, I know Twitter wasn't up there for very long, but it's a mine of useful information in that in 2012 you walked into a bar that you hadn't been into for a long time in Sweden and bumped into an ETC player, a Swedish guy, and ended up getting drunk with him at this bar. And I suspect that's where you ended up couch surfing for a while when you needed to.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to go too deep into the WTC breaking away from the ETC. I mean, I feel like the how and the why has been extensively covered. In fact, if you Google Neil Kerr 40K, I get about 25 podcasts that you were on within the space of about 2 months talking about that. So
yeah, and you can probably find about 20 different essays as well.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot about the why. But I'm interested now, a year after the fact, looking back, how hard was that whole period of time for you? Just in terms of the decision making and then the fallout, and then obviously a lot of support as well. How difficult was that whole period and tumultuous?
It was tough. I mean, it's sort of since 2012, I'd actually been sort of talking about and pushing that maybe 40k should break away. There's been growing issue. There's been growing issue, as you said, if you can find this out information. But there's been growing issue for many years. So there was always this thing of, I think we should do it, and eventually enough people within the 40k, captains people in the 40k community, they see that we should do it. And it wasn't easy, because it's like this big event that we've been part of for a very long time. I've been going since 2009. And I've made so many friends, not just in 40k. I had a lot of friends in the other gaming systems, guys that either were previously 40k players and moved to other games, or just people I just met. I can put a big shout out to people like Woody, who plays Ninth Age for Team Ireland, an absolute legend, a guy I love to bits. And it's like, if we do this, these are people I'm not going to see again. I've got friends of mine, even my old friends in the UK, that would play in, Flames of War or Ninth Age Age Sigmar. And I was like, this was the time, because I moved to Sweden, I only got to see them once a year, and it was ETC. And it's like, well, this is going to burn bridges. And while I'm not the only person, there's obviously a lot, most of the 40k community being the similar boat. But, there comes a point where you need to look out for the people you're invested in. And been quite brutal. My time was invested in the 40k community, and I knew we could do better. Tom Adriani also knew we could do better, And, it was a case of, we truly believe this, and enough people believe it with us and believe that we could deliver better. So we sort of made the decision, and it's exactly a year ago, in fact. We're obviously, when this episode goes out, it's going to go out later, but we're recording now on 28th of January. And this time last year, I was in the UK. I'd flown back to the UK to play in a tournament in Manchester, hosted by Gareth Jones and Team Wales. Same weekend as the LVO. And we decided, yes, we're going to make the vote. All the 48 captains says we want to have a vote. We want to vote on this. And so we put the vote up on the Saturday morning. And I'm at this tournament, and literally within, the vote goes up, and within a couple of hours, people are saying to me, 40k is leaving the ETC. And I'm like, what? The vote happened that quick because it's overwhelming. It was all but two captains, all but two teams said yes.
Yeah.
To leave, and it was just it happened so fast, and it was actually really tough because at this tournament, which was in Element Games in Stockport, the English 9th Age team were there, and again, Mike Newman, one of my best buddies, is on that team, and he's like, what just happened? Like, I'm not going to see you. And it was tough, but it was like, this is what's got to happen. And I had, some very angry phone calls that night from a few people, like a few of the people from the organising committee of the ETC, like, what have you done? How dare you? And that. And it's like, well, it's not, what have I done? This is unfortunately the will of the community, of the 40k community. It's, their will be done. That's always been the ETC's motto, by the players, for players. And that was the one, that was, at the end of the day, that's what the 40k players wanted. They just unfortunately got tired of the issues. So it happened so fast. And to be fair, I had always pushed, if we're going to leave, we leave the next year, because at the time we were in the middle of an ETC cycle. This was January. Right. They went to go to Luxembourg in August. Luxembourg organisers have made plans in good faith that they're going to have all these players, including 40k. So that was the one thing I wasn't expecting, was it was leave this year. So it's like, oh right, we've got 7 months to organise the WTC. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. And then
so it was it was a shock. It was good because I was something I wanted, and it's something I expected as well, because I knew the feelings amongst the community, but the suddenness of it and the fact we were going to do it that year was a bit of a shock.
And then all of that happens, and then COVID hits. So there was genuine excitement about going to Austria. I'm was part of the New Zealand team that was expected to go to Austria, and making that first ever WTC was going to be super exciting. And for you, being involved in that and organising and being the chief judge at it, and it just must have been every minute with the other TOs talking through all the possible scenarios, and it must have been incredibly challenging, minute to minute and day to day, trying to figure out whether you keep it on or call it off.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I said, we had the vote exactly a year ago, and this was also when you first started to hear real talk about COVID. Cases are hitting Europe, and I'm getting on a flight flying back to Sweden on the Sunday, and people are like, oh, this COVID thing, and it's like, yeah, everyone's like, yeah, it'll blow over, just like swine flu blew over. Obviously, everybody was wrong. Yeah. And so at the time, we were at first, that initial month, we were like, okay, let's put out feelers. Who wants to get involved? We got bids through quite quickly, and things moved very quickly. And we then started to have conversations with people in the WTC community who themselves worked in pharmaceuticals or worked as doctors. For example, one of the Serbian players, he actually works with one of the pharmaceutical companies, and he's like, every project shut down. The only thing we're now working on is COVID vaccine. This is for real. This is the shit kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so very quickly we realized, this is escalating out of control. What do we do? So by this point, we're now hitting sort of Easter time. Last year, we had a conversation with the Austrians. We're like, look, all the vibes they're getting from their government is this lockdown is going to be a long-term thing, and we felt the same. So we talked to the captains, and the general said, George, it's better just to cancel. So we cancelled last year, and now we're into 2021, and we're in the same conversation, actually.
Yeah. So my next question is, realistically, do you think this will happen this year?
Well, if you asked me a week ago, I would have probably said 50-50, depending on how well the vaccine rollout happens. Because it's all dependent on, can we run a safe event, and can we run an event that's viable in terms of people not being stuck in quarantine either side of coming to the event, and these kind of things. And so there was hope. There was a lot of positivity, a lot of hope with the vaccine rollout started and stuff.
Yeah.
So we had a conversation with the Austrians this week about what's the situation, how do they feel, what's in terms of what's the financial situation, do we have deadlines to commit to monetarily?
Yeah.
So we then talked this through. We talked to the captains, and what we decided is, just like last year, we're gonna wait till Easter. So Easter's the start of April. So in 2 months' time, we're gonna sit down with the Austrians, with the captains, and look how are things looking.
So
I think that's the only thing we can do.
It very much is like last year. Wait till just as long as you can before you make the call.
But also at the same time, don't wait too long, because you don't want to keep hoping, and then you cancel late and people lose money. So we sort of proposed April. The majority of the teams were like, yeah, we're happy with that. I mean, a lot of guys like yourselves, the Australians, the Americans, the Canadians, they're all pretty much saying that they're either already said they're not going to come, or they know they're not unlikely to come. If I'm being honest, I think that if there is an event this year, it will absolutely be Europe only. Right. Potentially even EU only, depending what the restrictions are. Yeah. That's if. But what we've decided is we will most likely not move the event, though, in terms of date. Because if we start planning, if we go later in the year, there's lots of other issues there, because of people booking holidays. Being in August is great because it falls into everybody's summer holidays in Europe, at least.
Yeah. And if it can happen in that week, Tom told me there's a beer festival on at the same time. So that would
actually moved it. It was actually meant to be the week before, and they moved it for us.
Yeah,
that's how much they want it.
Yeah.
So keeping tabs on the situation, holding hope that that things will start to turn up, and there'll be an upward turn in vaccinations, things start to look positive, but be realistic at the same time that we may be postponed in 2022. Like, Easter feels like a good time to sort of say yay or nay. And sort of play like that.
We know that COVID's a very fast-moving, quickly changing situation. So by the time we've had this conversation now, by the time this episode goes to air, it may well have changed. And what I'm encouraging people to do is keep an eye on the WTC Facebook page, and keep your ear on the WTC Squadcast podcast, because you guys will have up-to-date information as the situation changes.
If worse comes to worse, it'll be 2022, and we'll just work towards that. And it'll be massive. It'll be awesome. I mean, you guys want to come as a first-time team, New Zealand? We've got teams from Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Israel. I mean, it's becoming a big deal. Actually, quite scary how many teams have not only said they're interested, but have actually sent us copies of passports to prove they're legitimate teams already.
Yeah.
So it's super, when it happens, be it this year or next year, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be truly international.
Yeah, I just need to decide what army I'm playing and get some reps in, rather than constantly changing my mind about things. I just say I'll play an army and go, oh, this is crap. I think the main issue is that I'm crap. But anyway... listen, Neil, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I understand that, in a COVID environment, in the middle of where you are, things are extremely challenging for a TO when there are no tournaments, and with the WTC just riding that fine line. So I really appreciate you talking to us about it and being so candid with your answers as well.
No worries. I might get flack off Tom and Ishik for being too candid, but I didn't. Everybody knows who I am, and I speak my mind, and I speak. I say things as they are. So
yeah. Well, and I think it's great to have someone, right up the front of the organisation who is like that. So appreciate your time. You are a 40K game changer, and it's been fantastic to talk to you, mate.
It's been fantastic having been on as well, Steve. Thanks.
My thanks to Neil Kerr. The links to the WTC Squadcast and the WTC Facebook page are in our show notes if you want any updates on what's going on. Make sure you check out the big sale on the pre-loved models on the Frontline Gaming eBay store. A lot of great deals there. If you enjoyed this episode of 40K Game Changers, you can find the full catalogue of amazing conversations at 40kgamechangers.com. We're also on Facebook if you like the page for the latest updates, and maybe leave us a review. Next week on the program, the team from one of the biggest 40K channels and fastest growing 40K content providers on the planet. We talk to 40K Play On Tabletop. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Steve Joel, and this has been 40K Game Changers.